Hey there, welcome to God Think TV. I'm Pastor Bob, and I have a wonderful guest here with me today, and a longtime friend. I mean, a really long time.
Long time.
Long time. Like 40, 45 years,
yeah,
like
yeah,
a long
something
time.
like that, yeah.
And this is Dr. Bob Carlsen, and he is actually a biochemist, and pretty good guy, actually, on a lot of things. And I brought him in today because actually, and I shared this with Bob, is that God put him on my heart. I woke up one morning and I'm like, hey, I'm going to have Dr. Bob on the show. And we're talking about things that in the creation and how the creation began and all sorts of stuff like that. And guess what? This guy is actually writing a book on evolution. And he knows this kind of stuff. So I thought, heck, I should bring somebody smart on. You know what I'm saying? But
Instead, you brought me.
Yes. But hey, by the way, for everybody out there, you all keep Brooke in your prayers. She's back there behind the camera, but she's coughing up a storm and she's not feeling well today. Yes. Don't spit your cough drop out over here. But anyway, if you could, bring some prayers before the Lord for her, that would be just awesome. So, hey, we are in season 4. This is actually, I believe, our third. Season 4 is actually God Think TV. The general, scope of it is actually Thoughts from the Mountain, I call it. And but this time we're talking about is really talking about God's perspective versus our perspective. And I thought this would be an awesome time to talk to Dr. Bob about Genesis. We began this series with a talk on Genesis and how things started. And but first, I want to know a little bit about you. So, Dr. Bob, tell us about you a little bit.
When do you want to start?
Well, since you're only 36 years old, you can start at the beginning.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
We're just,
Born in Houston, didn't stay there long.
Thank
Moved
God.
away when I was about 6 months, which was a wise move because we moved to Southern California where there are no hurricanes.
That's nice.
And I grew up in Southern California in the 50s. It was the golden decade. Everything was great. The wars were over and business was booming. It was great. I kind of had a Leave It to Beaver childhood. Wonderful. I eventually went to college, got a degree at Berkeley, and then went to UCLA Medical School for graduate work and got a PhD. I went to State University of New York at Buffalo for a few years and did research and did some teaching there. And at that point, God finally got a hold of me. Not that I had not had any interest in him. I'd been looking for him for a long time and finally decided I probably couldn't find him. I couldn't know about him. But he set me straight. And he showed up, and I got saved, and he let me know that this church was where I was supposed to be. So I moved here, and I've been here for a really long time.
In Brooke years, it's a really long time.
almost the whole 36 years I've been alive.
Yes,
almost
and
that
then
long.
some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Twice over.
Yeah.
And so here I am.
Here you are.
Here I am.
I love it. I just to put this in context, years ago, Dr. Bob taught at our church on evolution. And it always struck me. There were components about that teaching that always struck me. And then God's put it on his heart to actually write a book on evolution. And we want to discuss that a little bit today, if that's okay with you. And just kind of get into that, and maybe from a biblical point of view, but also from what your studies have brought. And you might be surprised out there because you're going to think you're just going to get maybe standard answers. But Dr. Bob, he is actually a research guy. So he wants to really uncover what it all really means. And so to put it in context, what we've been talking about here is what's God's perspective about us and what are our perspectives, and when do the two coincide, if they ever coincide, which is kind of
We're looking for that.
Yeah, we're looking for that at some point in time. So we started this series with the beginnings, in the beginning, Genesis 1:1, and
Right.
and this place of eternity, God, and all of a sudden he has this beginning, and like there we are. He's like, let's start this. Now it wasn't his beginning, it was our beginning. And a lot of things in evolution and things like that, they all point back or try to point back to some beginning, and then try to formulate from there. And so the other thing is God brought stuff into existence. Right? And
he did.
Yeah, he did. And you set it forward, but that's not how everybody thinks about it.
Probably not.
No, not at all. Huh? So, the whole Big Bang thing we talked about a little and stuff like that. So the question I have is, what evidence is there for creation?
Okay. Just off the top of my head.
Yes, versus evolution. When you studied it, and so what kind of evidence do you see?
In terms of the whole universe, astrophysicists have been working on this problem for a very long time to try to find a natural first cause for the universe, and they don't have one. The Big Bang Theory actually does not describe the beginning.
Right.
The Big Bang Theory is about what happens right after the beginning. There's a very short period of time. It's called the Planck Era, from Max Planck, very famous German physicist. And wrap your mind around this now.
It's hard.
It's a really long span of time, 10 to the minus 43rd seconds. That's the Planck Era. That's a decimal point, 42 zeros, and a 1.
You see what kind of conversations we have?
Yeah, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
After that, the Big Bang Theory is about what happened after that. It does not describe a beginning. It describes what transpires after that, and the original Big Bang Theory had some problems. Another physicist named Alan Guth and his cohort Paul Steinhardt, who has since decided he doesn't like the idea. Alan Guth has come up with what he calls inflation, which doesn't mean money. It's a way to get around some of the problems for the Big Bang Theory that do not predict the way the universe is now. Inflation solves some of those problems, comes up with some other problems of its own. The trick is that after all billions of years that the evidence indicates the universe has been around, and Genesis doesn't say when he created it, just says he created it. During that long, long time, the universe has come out, there's something called a cosmological constant, which you don't really care what that is, but it's almost exactly 1 at this point. If it didn't start off being pretty much precisely 1, it would be way off from that now. And we wouldn't be here talking about it.
Oh, we'd have a hard time living?
Yeah. The universe wouldn't even look like it looks like now.
Wow.
So the question is, how do you get it to be exactly right to begin with? Accidentally. Well, I think you don't.
You mean you need a God component?
You do need a God component, yes.
So I have a question for you. So people out there, they're thinking about, they've been taught evolution in school and all that. And I always look at, this whole section's on perspective.
Right.
So now, if you were going to be a scientist or go into science and, study some of these things,
right.
Is there a required perspective now in the field?
There is a required perspective.
What's that?
You must be a naturalist. You must be a naturalist. If you are not, you'd best keep it quiet, or you won't get an academic position, and research funds and grants will dry up rather quickly.
Now, a naturalist, naturalism, what's that all about? I mean, in a nutshell.
That you don't need God as the first cause. You don't need God to create anything. It just happens. Somehow laws of physics and mathematics cause all this. No such laws has ever been proposed. discovered, whatever you want to call it. They keep naming some of these and call them laws, but actually they're not. Nobody has anything like that.
So, and I know we've discussed this in the past, so it sounds like they have to have a faith in some things.
They do.
Matter of fact, I think I've heard Dr. Bob use this word before. They actually have a philosophy,
It's a philosophy.
of the evolution theory. It's not just matter of fact, the way we like to talk about it is actually a competing religion to those of you out there who might actually be Christians. And what does that look like? I mean, what is their philosophy? How does that unfold in science community?
Scientists like to figure out what makes things tick. That's really kind of why you would go into science. You're curious. You want to see how things work. And if God is the ultimate answer, that part of the puzzle goes away. It's not studyable. And from a perspective of discovery, that's a dead end.
It's not studyable? You mean it's eliminated completely?
It's eliminated. What you can do is you can find out how what God created works, and you can use that to benefit the society. All the technology comes from that. Medical advances all come from that, figuring out what works.
Right.
And how it works and how we can take advantage of that. But that really has nothing to do with a natural cause.
Got it.
I think that the philosophy of naturalism, which actually was being sought long before Darwin just did a much better job of putting it together. He was kind of rushing to publication at the time to get first dibs on it.
Oh, he wanted to be there first.
Because he could hear the footsteps of other people doing the same thing. And other people had done something like this, but his version was just put together a whole lot better.
So I have questions for you. Actually, a few questions I developed this morning. I was just asking the Lord about all this, and so I'll read them to you. And so then you have to answer, and these people want to know. So
do I.
Yeah, so do you. Is evolution a search for relevance outside of our relevance to God?
I'm not sure it's a search for relevance outside of God, because outside of God, the creation does not have relevance of any sort. Not logically, not ultimately.
That's a scary place, eh?
Yeah.
That means that everybody has situational ethics. They have no future, really. They live. They take as much advantage of everything they can get, and then they die, and then that's the end for them.
And there is no morality other than what's convenient.
So that really brings it to a whole different realm of being, actually. Because if you take that to the nth degree, and I like to talk to some of the Christians out there, because when you start to buy into some of that, you actually are buying into a whole, really another kind of religion that has laws that are always changing, situationally relevant, and could turn into something like a terrible mess on the earth. Much worse than what we have ever seen, actually. And we've seen some bad stuff over the years from people who didn't know God, didn't believe in God, figured they had, they were here for a little time, let's take advantage of it, let's eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, and it's all over. Yeah. And that's a pretty interesting, kind of a take on things. I have another question for you. The second thing I was thinking is, a search for a beginning outside of our beginning with God. It seems to me as though it's kind of demeaning in a lot of ways.
It is.
It is.
Because it makes us accidental.
Right. And so, and I want to continue. You actually took the words out of my mouth because you haven't seen my notes, but it's interesting. It says, I wrote to myself, I said, we would prefer an unintentional accident or coincidence of unrelated things rather than a purposeful, intentional plan of a loving creator. That's actually at the heart of this, by the way, is how people can actually adopt just be an accident of nature, an accident of like things coming together in space. And I know I'm talking with Dr. Bob, there's not enough time for those things to actually come together in space and make life, no matter how much you try. And then, it just seemed to me like, it was so demeaning. It was like we were like worthless pieces of tissue, which actually goes to, I believe, where a lot of people have gone nowadays with abortion, right? With taking people's lives when they're older. Yep. That could be a problem for you and me. You know what I'm saying? Brooke, she has a couple more years, but there's some.
36.
Yeah, 36 years old. But so the deal is, it really devalues life in so many ways. What's your thoughts on all this? Tell those guys.
I think one of the motivations for the accidental, the natural source for all this is that we no longer have an obligation or responsibility. We can do whatever we want, and it's okay.
You think that's the actual
I think it's a strong
motivation
I
right
think
behind
it's a strong motivation.
So that just like in the Old Testament, when even in God's people, every man did what was right in his own eyes.
Yeah.
That led to a big mess.
It did. Still does.
It still does.
Yeah.
Wow. So there's a lot behind this evolution theory, trying to figure out, were we just an accident of nature or a creation of God, that really it brings people to the kind of a lower base of life. They're not really their value of their life now, all of a sudden, that's what I meant by demeaning it. Their value of their life now, all of a sudden, it's, you're just flesh and a bunch of water and worthless.
To some extent, they will value their life by their position in the society. I'm more valuable than they are. I have more power, more authority, and more wealth. I'm more valuable.
That sounds a lot like humanism.
Yeah.
In so many ways.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. So this little topic that we're just talking about here, and by the way, this guy has studied this stuff inside out, upside down, and half the time you're upside down, aren't you? Yes.
Most of the time, yes.
Because he's actually a very honest scientist in that he doesn't just stop with things he wants to hear. I mean, we've discussed this, and there's some things that you find that don't add up, and he wants to be honest with that, intellectually honest and honest before the Lord.
Right.
And like, what does this look like? And I always think about, God even says that, the hidden things belong to God. Things that are revealed belong to us and our children forever. And so there's a real component of that that actually works in science and life. And so, I'm sure there's 1,000 things that are totally not revealed to you. And how do you deal with that as a man of God?
Early on, I would say I've been a problem. Like, hey, I wanted to know everything. But I don't. I'm not going to. I'm not going to know much of anything, it turns out, compared to what is available to be known. The hidden things of God.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that now. I'm okay with saying, I don't know. I think one of the problems with evolutionary thinking is they're not okay with saying, I don't know.
Wow.
And to the extent that they'll say, I don't know, they will push it off onto, say, somebody else's turf or the unknowable, but certainly not the supernatural. Just, it's too far back, too little information, we're probably not going to be able to know about that part of it. But we can infer it.
Oh, so we make a bunch of assumptions.
We do make
And
assumptions.
then we build on a bunch of assumptions,
That happens.
which is very interesting because this is where God and humanism really depart. Because God doesn't want you to build your life on a bunch of assumptions.
No.
He's the truth. Jesus Christ himself, he is the truth. And he expects that we will build our lives on him, the truth,
Yes.
and also on our relationship with him, which got to one thing that, I wrote to myself this morning in preparing for you, and that is, it would appear that people have love issues deep in their soul. Because if you're okay with, ignoring a loving creator that wants to, be part of your life and actually began your life, that to me spoke, and like I said, the Holy Spirit was just speaking to me this morning. It's like, wow, this is really the heart of people. They actually have love issues deep inside. They can't believe that there's this loving creator that cares about them. And then how does that project out into the universe and people? Because if I don't have that here, what would cause me to have love for you and love for Brooke and love for anybody else? Where does that all go? So there's a lot at stake with this issue.
Oh, huge amount at stake. It's a philosophy that if you take it far enough, love becomes a convenience. Morality is a convenience. Everything is just a convenience.
Life is a convenience.
It's a convenience or an inconvenience.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I wanted to stop it here, and someday I may invite you back for some additional stuff. But I wanted to,
I have a question.
Oh, Brooke has a question back there.
Brooke is here.
And I hope the microphone can hear me. So,
Well, we'll repeat it for you, Brooke.
do you think that the idea of the supernatural in the science arena, does it discredit science in the popular opinion of scientists? That the idea of God or the supernatural or these mysterious things of God, to say, oh, well, this is God, this is God. And if you try to account supernatural, would that discredit you as a scientist?
The question was whether or not accepting of a supernatural component would discredit you as a scientist. The answer is in science now that it would. Science has defined science as purely naturalistic. Supernatural is considered to be unstudyable. You cannot investigate it, therefore we just don't consider it. It's just not part of science, as far as science is concerned. Which is interesting because there are a lot of things in the natural that cannot be studied, but they're considered to be part of science nonetheless.
Like what?
If you want to study, well, the Big Bang, if you want to study quite a few aspects of science that so far we can't really study, in terms of evolution, how can you study very early evolution, let's say of bacteria? Well, you can't. You can't go back. You can't run the film. There was nobody there. So you can't study that. It's all inferred. But because those bacteria were natural organisms, it's considered part of science, even though it can't really be studied, not directly.
Wow.
The supernatural is absolutely excluded from science by definition.
And do you think it should be included?
I think it should be included as something that we acknowledge we can't study it, but we can see its effects. There are, not to go down too much of a rabbit trail, there are particles called virtual particles. We cannot detect them, but we can detect their effects. Virtual particles are real, and they can just pop into existence. You can see it in the laboratory. They have real effects. What they are, nobody knows. 95% of the universe is considered now to be made up of dark matter and dark energy that we cannot detect. We can only
That's pretty crazy.
We can only see their effects. So far, we can't study those, just the effects. I think we can study the effects of the supernatural. So we should not
Wow.
exclude it.
So you would say maybe studying the effects of the virtual matter proves that the virtual matter exists.
Right.
So studying the effects of the supernatural would prove that.
In my estimation, that's true.
So if you eliminate the supernatural, that brings some problems. As a matter of fact, it's interesting. It's one thing we didn't cover in my notes today, but I had it at the very end, and it was out of Romans 8. And Paul speaking there how the creation is subject to vanity, and vanity is frustration and futility, and it's it's like it's implanted, and by the way, it's implanted there by God, it says, which is really strange. It's like God caused that, because there's things about creation and that means people and the whole creation that are they're frustrating, they're confusing, they're vanity. It's like vanity is air. It's it's like smoke. It's there and then it's gone, and you can't get your hands around it, which is really crazy on so many levels. And God put that in there because He's the answer.
Yes.
And you can study and study and study. There's like ever learning and never coming to a knowledge of the truth. You can just keep going, but God actually implanted in the system this futility. Incredible. Well, listen, unless Brooke has some more questions, but that was a great question, actually.
Excellent question.
Yeah. I want to thank Dr. Bob for coming on with us and enlightening us. And there's a lot more. Be looking for his book. That will it's going to be deep. Anyway, really do. From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for being on with us, and thank all our viewers out there. I hope this has opened your eyes to some things. If you liked us, give us a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button down below, because I don't really want to see poor Brooke have to come out here coughing and sick to say all these things. But you know the routine. Go do it. We really appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. God bless.